Human brain is a fascinating thing. This complicated organ allows us to perceive the surrounding reality in ways other biological species can't. By thinking. But at the same time, it distorts reality and creates illusions to protect us. Over the course of evolution, the brain adapted to the fact that the human psyche is extremely fragile. To shield us from anxiety and self-destruction, it developed psychological defense mechanisms. You're stressed and don't know what to do with your life? Don't make mistakes. Stay home. In times of social cataclysms, the scale of events is often so overwhelming that the mind can't handle it and begins to crumble under the pressure. To prevent that collapse, the brain activates another defense mechanism. It weaponizes your helplessness and despair and assigns blame for your suffering. There always has to be someone guilty. The politicians, the rich, those at the top of the power structure don't want to be the target of public anger, so they redirect it toward those who can't fight back. A skillfully crafted image of the villains who poison the well for everyone else is often pinned on the most vulnerable members of society. Immigrants. Fear of the unknown feeds anger, which may later transform into aggression. You were wrongfully harmed. You don't deserve this suffering. Why are they behaving like this? You're so much better than them. And so, the defense mechanism is set in motion. Wait, what is this video about again? Samurai Champloo is a 2004 historical anime series created by Shinichiro Watanabe and Manglobe Studio. The story takes place in 16th century Japan, where a 16-year-old Fu embarks on a long journey across Japan looking for the samurai who smells of sunflowers, with the help of her bodyguards, Mugen and Jin. You probably watched it. Samurai Champloo is best known for its aesthetics. A blend of samurai drama and hip-hop music from the creator of Cowboy Bebop sounds really exciting, and it's no surprise that this visual and musical fusion is what attracts people at first. When I first saw the opening of Champloo, I immediately fell in love. But there's much more to Samurai Champloo than just flashy aesthetics. A profound social and historical commentary lies hidden in plain sight, disguised as an action series. From the very first frame, the anime states that it's not historically accurate and deliberately jumbles different eras into a unique mix of cultures and perspectives. But by doing that, it doesn't shy away from the political discourse. On the contrary, it embraces multiple points of view to tackle the lingering pain of Japanese society, the belief in Japanese superiority. At its core, this belief has its psychological roots in an ability to accept the reality around you, a defense mechanism that supports our fragile mental health. Samurai Champloo breaks this defense mechanism and the harmful narratives apart with a boombox and a samurai sword. For the next 2 or so hours, I want to discuss the historical context of the series, how the characters embody the resistance against the existing power structure, how to finally break free from our defense mechanisms, and dozens of other topics. This is the complete analysis of a show that is deeply meaningful to me, so no wonder it's quite a lengthy one. It's so important to me that I'm even willing to make a video in English despite my thick Eastern European accent, but if a British accent is considered acceptable, then I guess I'll be fine. One last thing, there's no complete analysis without spoilers, so there are lots of spoilers ahead. Don't be afraid and stick to the video. Spoilers aren't that important to the overall enjoyment of the show. So welcome to my deep dive into Samurai Champloo. Where does it all start? Samurai Champloo aired in Japan from May 2004 to March 2005, and it was the first anime produced by the newly founded studio Manglobe. The core of the new studio consisted of former members of Sunrise, the studio responsible for Cowboy Bebop. This team was led by the already renowned but still young director Shinichiro Watanabe. Samurai Champloo wasn't based on a manga, so it was quite a risky move for the freshly founded Manglobe studio to begin their career with an original work, but I guess they truly believed in Watanabe to follow up strongly after Cowboy Bebop. He was given full creative freedom and was able to assemble an all-star production team. He was joined by his former colleagues from Sunrise, Dai Sato and Keiko Nobumoto as screenwriters, and Kazuki Akane and Tensai Okamura as storyboard artists. But there were many other notable additions. The team was complemented with the episode director and storyboard artist Sayo Yamamoto, who would later go on to direct Yuri on Ice and Lupin III, storyboard artist Hiroyuki Imaishi, the future co-founder of Studio Trigger and director of Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill. And the talent didn't stop there. Just look at the key animators: Mamoru Hosoda, now one of the most acclaimed anime directors, Masaaki Yuasa, the man behind Science Saru and one of the most unique directors in anime industry, and Takeshi Koike, the creator of an amazing Redline. Pre-production began in 2002, and the road to the final product was long and difficult. Just pre-production alone took a year. The initial plans were scrapped entirely, and everything was restarted from scratch. Watanabe described this period as, "Everyone thought I wasn't doing my job or goofing off, but I was really thinking." The long pre-production time led to all sorts of problems. Time and budget became pressing issues. As a result, the 3 final episodes were left without a soundtrack, and Tsuchi, one of the musicians working on the Champloo OST, was urgently summoned to create something in time. A recap episode was meant to buy some time, but Watanabe, in his own way, created one of the most unique recap episodes ever, and completely failed to save any time. But the biggest upset came from their broadcast company Fuji TV. The show premiered on May 20, 2004, but ran only for 17 episodes before being moved to their sister channel, Fuji Network System. This decision forced Manglobe to halt any production, and what is even worse, the sister channel decided to rebroadcast the whole series from the beginning, which caused even more delays to an already troubled broadcast history. But is that really where it all starts? The first ideas about Samurai Champloo had started forming in Watanabe's mind back in 1999. It was a very special time in Japan, the source of an existential crisis for most of the anime creators. I am looking at you, Hideaki Anno, and an extremely turbulent time for Japanese society, the lost decade. The lost decade, or even the lost decades, is the period of the economic crisis and stagnation that began in the early 90s. This crisis was so severe that Japan still hasn't fully recovered and continues to live with its legacy. But to understand how it influenced Samurai Champloo and Shinichiro Watanabe, we need to go back even further. It begins in post-war Japan, ravaged by World War II, enduring the harsh consequences of imperial rule. A new Japan was born. This new Japan entered the second half of the 20th century as an underdeveloped country with a mostly rural population. But within just 25-30 years, Japan made a miraculous economic recovery, what would later be called the Japanese economic miracle. A combination of economic reforms and financial aid from the United States launched an unprecedented period of economic growth. There were 2 key features of this miracle. The first, and the one that will become especially important for this video, was the creation of Keiretsu, business corporation networks made up of interlinked companies, including manufacturers, suppliers, and distributors. These newly founded corporations became the foundation of a rising middle class and introduced a new desirable life trajectory, Shushin Koyo, the guarantee of lifetime employment. The second feature was rapid, export-oriented industrialization. The US subsidized the Japanese economy and provided open access to its markets. As a result, cheap and technologically advanced goods from Japan flooded the global market. Honda, Sony, Mitsubishi all thrived during this period. By 1968, Japan had become the second largest economy in the world. Japan entered the 70s as a strong economic force, and not even the 1973 oil crisis could stop its steady economic growth. But while economic recovery became the envy all around the world, its socio-political recovery didn't go so smoothly. Scarred by the atomic bombings and the extreme violence of war, Japanese society entered a new era of social unrest. For roughly 30 years, Japan experienced a wave of protests, and the epicenter of this unrest was the student movement. Youth who had been drafted during the war returned to their universities and high schools to finish their study, but now they carried with them shame, guilt, and disappointment with the propaganda of the former imperial government. So, as early as September 1945, the first student strike took place at Mita High School against an authoritarian and traditional school director. These student groups represented the way to a new idealistic Japan. Their ideals were heavily influenced by socialist and communist ideologies. Social inequality, human rights, and the US occupation of Japan became the central themes of student protests. However, the Japanese government, closely tied and let's say influenced by the United States, wasn't able to just quietly ignore this looming threat. This political tension led to numerous strikes, uprisings, protests, and violent clashes with the police throughout the 50s and 60s. The violence escalated and reached its critical point in the beginning of 1970s. In February 1972, members of the United Red Army, a radical communist group, retreated to an isolated lodge near Mount Asama, where they engaged in an armed standoff with the riot police for 10 days. All 10 days of the standoff were broadcasted live by hundreds of reporters, turning it into an intense media spectacle. Its television ratings have never been surpassed since. The result of this terrorist attack was an utter shock to the Japanese society. It marked a complete downfall to all the protest movements, and from that point on, open political activism became distasteful to the whole country. Economic power and stability emerged as the ultimate indicators of national success. It seemed that nothing could threaten Japan's economic dominance, especially as the country moved into the wealthy 1980s. If you ask random people on the street what Japanese cities look like, most will probably describe Tokyo in the 1980s. Neon-Night City, technological superiority, Miki Matsubara's scene in Stay With Me, and Yakuza films are all part of the stereotypical nostalgia package for a Japan that never quite existed. But this cultural myth originated from exactly this time. Never before had Japan experienced such wealth and stability. The middle class was steadily growing, the real estate market was booming, and it seemed the model of economic stability was working. But all good things must come to an end, and Japan soon faced another crisis. It's 1989, and amidst the government's euphoria, the bubble economy burst. From 1989 and throughout the next 15 years, Japan entered a period of economic decline known as the Lost Decade. Though the first serious stock market crashes began in 1989, Japan didn't face a full-scale crisis until the end of 1991. The consequences of the recession were devastating. The stock market crashed by 80%, thousands of businesses went bankrupt, and unemployment ran rampant. And in the middle of this economical disaster and chaos, we find the primary victim of it all, the Japanese youth. You see, economic stability and lifelong employment, the pillars of Japanese society since the 1970s and a source of national pride, are now completely out of reach for the youth. The unemployment rate for the people in their 20s skyrockets, reaching 10%, much higher than for any other age group. The ever-strong keiretsu were collapsing one after another, and those that were still standing were not offering lifelong employment for new employees anymore. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, various legal protections were put in place to guarantee most workers lifelong employment. So now, the companies are obligated to keep the privilege for those hired under the old system, and it's too expensive to offer the same terms for new employees now. So, even if you're lucky enough to find a job, you'll be hired as Hiseki Koyo, a non-regular or temporary employment contract. This basically means that you're no longer protected by law against any employer's decisions. What makes things worse is that society hasn't properly processed or acknowledged all the woes of the recession, the status of the frozen job market, and continued to apply the same expectation as for previous generation. A family, a new car, and a house, by the age of 30, all at a time when simply finding a job is already quite an achievement. Sound reasonable, right? All this led to the birth of the lost generation, the ugly child of the lost decade. Young men and women faced the challenges they couldn't overcome, often without any support from their families. These unresolved and unassisted struggles then transformed into all kinds of personal anxieties, which in turn manifested as a collective generational trauma. Thousands upon thousands of people were searching for ways to cope with this crisis. And what could be the most popular way to forget your misery and try to stop feeling helplessness without demanding real societal changes? Escapism, of course. Political activism had been completely wiped out in the 70s and was still largely rejected by society as a valid way to address political issues. As a result, all the anxieties were internalized and you were left to deal with the problems alone. Unemployed, isolated people began to completely avoid any social interaction and delve into fictional worlds. Otaku and Hikikomori are products of this exact time. Various shady organizations began to take advantage of the struggling individuals by offering them false hope. Religious cults had been gaining influence since the 1980s, but things reached a boiling point in 1995. Members of the religious cult Aum Shinrikyo released sarin, the deadly gas, into the Tokyo subway in an attempt to trigger the apocalypse, which resulted in 14 deaths and more than 1,000 injured. Neon Genesis Evangelion, Welcome to the NHK are the reflection of the apocalyptic, depressed society of the lost decade. But there's one more form of escapism that's rarely discussed in the media: nationalism. The term nationalism can take many forms and isn't necessarily used only in a negative sense. Anti-colonial movements are often presented as nationalist movements, but in this case, we're talking specifically about Japanese nationalism. The roots of Japanese nationalism lie in the pre-World War II concept of the Japanese nation. National identity was closely tied to the state and to its central figure, the emperor. The Emperor of Japan was seen as a direct descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu, so Japan had a divine right to rule over the other nations. How lucky for them. After World War II, this belief system didn't disappear, but changed direction and re-emerged in a different form: Nihon Jinron, or the theories of Japanese-ness. The idea of being the center of the world no longer seemed viable after the defeat. But what if you really wanted to feel unique? Nihon Jinron, as a popular genre of literature, emerged in the 1960s and already began to lose momentum in the 70s, but the ideas expressed in these books resurfaced in the 90s. The basic concepts of Nihon Jinron are the following. The Japanese can be treated as a culturally and socially homogeneous racial entity whose essence is virtually unchanged through time. The Japanese differ radically from all other known peoples in terms of society, culture, and language. Japanese blood is essential in order to understand Japanese society, culture, and language. Foreigners are incapable of completely understanding Japanese culture and language. So it's essentially the idea of cultural superiority over all other nations. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the readers of Nihon Jinron were already politically engaged, so their interest is easily explained. But how did this idea spread among the frustrated, introverted youth of the 90s? The rise of interest in Japanese cultural nationalism was described by Japanese psychologist Kamaya Rika, who defined this phenomenon as petite nationalism syndrome. Petite nationalism syndrome is a form of make-believe patriotism that Japanese youth use to soothe their personal anxieties. According to another researcher, Keiichi Kumagai, petite nationalists are usually middle-class men who came of age with their futures hanging in the balance after the 1990s bubble economic collapse. Anxious about rampant unemployment and rapid shifts in Japanese society, many of these men chose to adopt new self-identities and forms of masculinity in order to cope. Our petite nationalists often had little to no interest in real political issues or historical controversies. For them, nationalism is just a coping mechanism to avoid facing personal anxieties. Just imagine, you project your own identity onto an entire nation and begin to feel like a part of a superior nation. It empowers you, it uplifts you, but unfortunately it's just another convenient form of escapism. This kind of nationalism serves to satisfy your current emotional needs, but when necessary, another identity can be used, like being an otaku. In this context, these identities are easily interchangeable. They are just different forms of escapism after all, and you choose whichever is the best form at the moment. But over time, these young petite nationalists began assembling in online or even offline groups, just like otakus at anime conventions, sharing their experiences as they faced societal changes and adult life challenges. Some young individuals, mostly men, began engaging with politics more and more, which eventually exposed them to right-wing ideologies. The mild cultural nationalism evolved into more aggressive nationalism. This shift brought with it the usual suspects of right-wing rhetoric, xenophobic attitudes toward China and Korea, and renewed calls for increased militarization. Regardless of the form, whether aggressive hardcore nationalism or quiet cultural one, a motive of the glorious past continues to captivate young hearts. And if you're going to make Japan great again, you need some kind of romantic cultural image. And what fits better than Edo period Japan with its brave and loyal samurais, magnificent Hokusai paintings, in a unified country? So it's no coincidence that the Edo period was chosen as the setting of Samurai Champloo. This is only my assumption, but I believe Shinichiro Watanabe fully understood what was happening with Japanese youth and their new escapist fantasy, and he still deliberately chose this historical period. In one interview, he mentioned that the anime does deal with samurai, and in the back of my mind, I always worried it would be seen as nationalistic. If you watch the anime, it's clear that it has nothing to do with it. It's not an anime designed to protect Japan's unique traditions and culture. But I would argue that he didn't just want to distance his creation from nationalists, but went even further and actively opposed these harmful narratives. And so we are finally back to Samurai Champloo. So once again, where do we start? Let's begin with a brief plot description of the series. Across 26 episodes, we follow the journey through 16th century Tokugawa Japan with the three main characters, Mugen, Jin and Fu. Already in the first episode, Shinichiro Watanabe introduces viewers to the main ideas that I want to explore in this video. So, the teenage girl Fu works at a local tea house in some provincial town, and let's just say she is not good at her job. It seems that the town she is living in suffers from the reign of the ruthless governor and his clan. Unfortunately for them, two other main characters step into their town. Jin and Mugen separately decide to challenge the authority of the governor. Jin by slaying his bodyguards, Mugen by breaking all the fingers of the governor's son so he could fight the fearsome bodyguards himself. Casual Tuesday at the time, I suppose. The bodyguards are killed, so Jin and Mugen decide to find out who is stronger between them by trying to kill each other, though they aren't able to define a winner due to the poor condition of the building. After Fu's workplace and her home are burned down, she decides to finally leave town to find the mysterious samurai who smells of sunflowers. She helps Mugen and Jin to escape their execution under the condition that they will act as her bodyguards and help her find the sunflower samurai. And so they set off to find the sunflower samurai, but not before cutting down half of the opposing army. Three complete strangers embark on a long journey across Japan without a clear destination and without any means to survive. Mugen and Jin has already tried to kill each other before and only agreed to hold off their fight until the end of the journey, but that doesn't mean they like each other. The personalities in the group don't really mesh either, so how did they pull off staying together for so long? You see, our heroes, despite all their differences, are very similar in one aspect of their lives. They have been driven to the fringes of society and denied basic human rights. The main characters became an encapsulation of everything wrong with the image of the ideal past. Through the characters, authors of Samurai Champloo explore what it means to be an outcast, how narratives shape your personality, and how one might try to escape such a desperate position. Though our heroes serve as vessels to express the creator's ideas, they are not merely one-dimensional instruments. The plot doesn't really focus on the end goal of finding Sunflower Samurai. Instead, it builds around the episodic structure of Samurai Champloo. Every 1 or 2 episodes bring a new story that shows the character from a fresh angle and a new development of their relationship within the group. So the focus of the story is on our characters and their personal journeys. So let's look at them then, and let's start with the boys. Mugen. Arguably, he is the most popular character in the show, and for good reason. He feels very different from the rest of the characters. And you can see the difference from the start. His appearance alone makes it clearer. He is noticeably more dark-skinned than the other main characters, wears a bright red jacket with brown shorts, hardly a big fashion choice in 16th century Japan, His hair is usually messy and untidy. He has blue bands tattooed around his wrists and ankles and has 2 blue orb-shaped earrings. So his image is very far removed from the image of the moderate medieval samurai. But nothing emphasizes his difference more than his fighting style. While samurai use their weapons as efficiently as possible with no wasted movements, even graceful in a way, Mugen is the complete opposite. His fighting style is a blend of capoeira and breakdancing. His movements look erratic and wild. He doesn't care about defense, only offense. Instead of katana, he uses a broadsword, somewhat reminiscent of sai, and carries a hidden dagger-like sword on his back for the last resort situations. But his arsenal is not limited to these weapons. He uses his shoes, legs, the surrounding terrain, and any objects around him to win a fight. It's a spectacle, unlike anything usually depicted in samurai series. But where does this uniqueness come from? He answers this question himself in the first episode. The Ryukyu Islands are an island chain stretching south of Japan to the near proximity of Taiwan and China. The largest island is Okinawa, widely known as a summer resort and a place for summer vacation and anime. Now it's an integral part of Japan, but in Tokugawa Japan, the Ryukyu Islands were part of the Ryukyu Kingdom. For centuries, the Ryukyu Kingdom was a tributary state of Imperial China with a high degree of independence. But in 1609, it was invaded by Satsuma domain of Japan and forced to become vassal state. Later, in 1879, it was fully annexed by Japan. The Satsuma clan exploited the islands and their population, forcing them into brown sugar production. Brown sugar was a highly valuable trade good, so the population had to pay annual tribute in sugar instead of rice, and prioritize the production of brown sugar over food crops. This led to shortages in food and eventually to massive famines. This period is known as Satajigoku, or sugar hell. The life of the Ryukyuan people on the islands was a constant struggle. But what about Ryukyuans on the mainland, like Mugen? Under the rule of Tokugawa shogunate, a new caste system was established. There were 4 classes: samurais, peasants, craftsmen, merchants, with a military ruling class of the daimyo above them. Where was the place in this caste system for an ethnic minority like Mugen? There wasn't one. That meant living on the edges of society and most likely earning a living by doing something illegal, the position of the lowest of the low. But what's even more important for our discussion is the position of the Ryukyuans in modern society. The ideas of Nihonjin Ron that I discussed in the previous part influenced the creation of another myth, the myth of Japanese homogeneity. Basically, the Japanese are a cultural superior nation, and only this one race and culture should exist within the country. And as a result, all other native ethnic minorities are being erased. The government actively supports this idea and denies the existence of any national or racial discrimination. Local Okinawan culture and language are only used as a selling product to tourists and often fetishized in the process. It's not uncommon for the ethnic minorities to face discrimination when looking for housing or jobs due to the negative stereotypes. The whole image of Japan is constructed around the unity of the Japanese nation, and any ethnic minorities don't fit that image, so their very existence is hidden from the world. To make a main character from the Ryukyu Islands is very uncommon in itself, but Mugen isn't just from the Ryukyus, his national identity is important to the show. How does this identity manifest itself in the series? First, Mugen mentions that he is Ryukyuan, usually in the context of showing complete disregard for authority or respect for the shogunate. Second, Mugen has a very particular near-death experience connected to his homeland. He delves into visions of the underworld where he meets the Panto, a group of mysterious supernatural creatures originated from the Miyako Islands. They are believed to scare away evil spirits and bring good fortune. While facing these pagan beings, we hear the song Abakuri Iyumi, which originated from the Amami Islands. And finally, his past in the Ryukyu Islands shaped the way Mugen sees his life. We learn more about his past in episodes 13 and 14. We find out that Mugen grew up on a small island which functioned as a prison for outlaws and as a hub for the brown sugar trade. It's safe to say that he had no family and had to survive in extremely harsh conditions. In these episodes, we also met Mukuru and Koza, his companions on the island, and the closest thing to a family. They were born on the island and they describe their birthplace with no other words than living hell. Beyond their common past, they visually look alike. They have darker skin, and only Mukuru and Mugen wear shorts in this anime, which is a shame. The three of them decided to escape by stealing a trade ship, but in the end, Mugen was betrayed by Mukuru and was captured by the authorities. Facing execution, Mugen threw himself off a cliff rather than being murdered by the local guards. Nobody knows how he survived such a fall, but he's the main character after all. After that, he lived as a pirate for a while, but we don't really know any details. So he's a fugitive without any future, without a family, without a place in society, without a home. The story and character of Mugen clearly mirrors the struggles of ethnic minorities in Japan. But he's far from being a martyr or the ideal hero. His defining personal trait is that he has no moral restraints or any restraints whatsoever, and often acts purely on instinctual desires. Other people often describe him as a mad dog or a beast. He can read or write and swears extensively. His wild fighting style reflects not only his lack of traditional fighting education, but also his wild nature. He's a ruthless killer and kills without hesitation. In episode 3, Hellhounds for Hire, he slashes the back of his temporary Yakuza allies just to fight Jin. In the final episodes, he was tracked down and challenged by three brothers seeking revenge, because Mugen had injured one of them during the pirate raids, but he failed even to recognize them. Shogunate soldiers, all kind of bandits and yakuzas, Buddhist warriors. He killed so many that he forgets them. Left behind by society, he didn't even try to integrate into it after. The thrill of the fight is what drives him. At first, he sticks with Fu just to fight Jin afterwards. When facing Ukon, the street killer, he said, simply because he considers Ukon a strong opponent. He moves through life driven by emotions, instincts, but the adrenaline rage from fighting isn't the only pleasure he chases. What else? Sex, of course. During their journey, all three protagonists encounter some kind of love interest, but only Mugen gives in to lust. He meets women of all kinds and he never holds back to fulfill his sexual desires. Yet in the end, he's always manipulated, falling into the same trap over and over. And then there's food. Hunger is their most common companion on the road, but it's only Mugen who can't control his appetites. When they need money for a ferry, he mocks the local yakuza, but then spends all the money on the squid. It's Mugen who swallows unknown mushrooms, steals food. If you need more proof about it, just look at how he devours crabs. But I don't think that creator's purpose is to make Mugen act as a primitive savage and only reinforce negative stereotypes. It was the deliberate decision to show what social alienation, anger and hopelessness can lead to. Mugen is a tragic character and not just a swirl of emotions. We can see it clearly when he meets Okuro. In episodes 16 and 17, Lullabies of the Lost, the story revolves around the fugitive man, Okuro. On a side note, if you haven't noticed yet, all the episode titles are very poetic. Okuro comes from the far north, Hokkaido Island, and he represents another ethnic minorities, the Ainu people. He is pursued by the mainland Matsumaya clan, who are trying to punish him for allegedly slaughtering his own village. In reality, villagers were killed by a disease brought by the Matsumaya clan. Okuro avenged his family by murdering the members of the Matsumaya clan, who not only didn't even try to help infected people and prevent the tragedy, but also covered up this ugly story. The fate of the indigenous Ainu people is strikingly similar to the fate of the Ryukyus. In 1637, the Tokugawa shogunate granted the Matsumaya clan exclusive rights to trade with the Ainu, but they certainly didn't stop at that point and established themselves as a new lords for the whole island. They brought smallpox to the Hokkaido island, decimated the local population with it, and then impoverished them further through the fur trade. Later, in the 19th century, Imperial Japan invaded Hokkaido, and from then on did everything to eradicate local language, culture, religion, assimilating the population, and continues to do it even now. The parallels between the two different ethnic minorities are reflected in the relationship between Mugen and Okuro. When Mugen hears a song from Okuro, he remarks that he had heard similar music in his own past, but they come from two polar opposite ends of Japan. Mugen challenged Okuro to a fight, as he always does, but in the process a special bond forms between them. Both are excluded from normal life, both have lost their homelands. When Mugen hears about the tragedy of Okuro's dead family, he says Okuro eyes, and he is not even sure that Okuro is alive, but that's nothing more than Mugen's projection of himself. Okuro is calm, composed and wise. Despite his tragedy, he has come to terms with himself and is tired of running. He accepts his trauma and feels the presence of his family. He is no longer alone. When pierced with fire arrows, he embraced his pain and grief, finally ending the chase by killing the leader of the Matsumaya clan, before silently ending his own life to finally rejoin his family. Shock is not an emotion we often see in Mugen, but he is truly shaken by Okuro. Moments before the Okuro's final fall from the cliff, Mugen admits his misjudgment in his inner narration. Similar stories, but very different lives. Mugen sees himself in Okuro, but cannot comprehend his behavior. Mugen is filled with anger and pain, and he has never known a better life, so his behavior is only natural. But Okuro shows to Mugen and the viewers that Mugen isn't just a mix of different thrills or impulses. He's a lost person, wrecked by a violent system. There's a way out, though Okuro's path was very tragic. Mugen longs for connection, but his traumatic experiences have shaped his view of relationships. When he met Mukuro and Koza, the only people he ever considered friends, they betrayed him again. If all you've ever known is pain, you would act accordingly to evade it. His savage behavior is not only the product of his childhood, but also a defense mechanism for survival. But Okuro is different. He isn't afraid, so Mugen shouldn't be afraid to change his life either. Exactly after his encounter with Okuro, Mugen embraces Fu and Jin as his friend for the first time and begins to change the way he approaches life and the people around him. But before we can discuss his relationship with the other characters and his newly discovered value in life, let's finish with the other main characters. Jin. At the start of the journey, Jin is presented as almost the total opposite of Mugen. In contrast with the wild image of Mugen, Jin embodies the traditional samurai image. He is tall, pale-skinned, neatly dressed with a ponytail, and has a sense of class. He wears a traditional blue hakama dress, a calm color in contrast with the bright red of Mugen. What else? Quite unsurprisingly, he wields a katana, and his fighting style couldn't be more different from Mugen's. His fighting style is refined, graceful and efficient with no wasted movement. He studied the science of sword throughout his childhood and perfected his style in many dojos around Japan. Overall, his demeanor is very calm and reserved. He is a man of few words and prefers communicating by humming rather than speaking. We don't learn much about him from what he says, and even his fellow travelers are annoyed by how little he speaks. He also tends to emphasize his cultureness, unlike this savage Mugen. So how did he end up with our group of outcasts? Although we know little about Jin's past, we do learn some important details along the way. In episode 9, Beatbox Bandits, Jin is confronted by one of his former dojo buddies. We discover that Jin killed the legendary warrior and Shiri Maria, his teacher and the head of the dojo. After Maria's death, the dojo was abandoned and soon shut down, and former students began hunting Jin to avenge their master. The truth about this incident was revealed much later in the series. The Sengoku Jidai, or the Warring States period, which was essentially the 2 centuries of civil war between feudal lords, had ended, and the Tokugawa shogunate had set their reign. With peace established, the need for hundreds of martial arts dojos had decreased rapidly, so the shogunate decided to turn Jin's dojo into a personal army of assassins. Jin didn't like the idea and opposed it. The shogunate also didn't like this young rebel, so they ordered his teacher to kill him. But the assassination attempt had failed, and instead Jin killed his master. This turned Jin into a Ronin, masterless samurai, with no ties to any other dojo, and no place in the society, outside of the already mentioned caste system. But why was Jin considered such a threat to the shogunate that he had to be eliminated? For that, let's look at real Tokugawa Japan. The Sengoku Jidai wasn't just a period of feudal unrest, it was a time of chaotic and unprecedented violent bloodshed for around 150 years. In 1603, through a series of military victories, Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate, and his clan would go on to rule Japan from 1603 to 1868. Ieyasu is regarded as one of the greatest Japanese rulers because he united Japan and finally brought peace to the struggling country. He governed the country from his news base in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, and that's one of the reasons for Tokyo's current position as one of the most developed cities in the world. But his reign wasn't just marked by his military successes. One of his most significant acts was the establishment of Buki Shotato, or laws for the military houses, which regulated the behavior of daimyos, feudal lords, the imperial court and samurais. No wonder this period is so romanticized now and constantly looked back upon. However, it wasn't all roses and sunshines. The Tokugawa shogunate was a strict military dictatorship where otherness wasn't welcomed. When Jin challenged the idea of being a part of the shogunate army, he also challenged the shogunate itself, and they were ruthless to any form of opposition. Also, the government established an extremely stratified society with a number of strict customs and regulations to promote stability, but in reality to have absolute power. For example, in one of the episodes, our poor group can't leave Edo without the proper documents and nearly executed for it. The Hakone checkpoint guards act violently and lawlessly under the pretense of protecting the capital. All the regulations extended to all the spheres of life, from culture and religion to foreign relations. Jin is an enemy to the shogunate and Ronin, so there's nothing for him in this society. But Jin is an extremely capable samurai. Maybe he might have found some remote place for himself, but that wasn't how he wanted to live, and Jin rejected the ruling view on the whole class of samurais. Samurais in the Edo period were one of the highest classes in society. They had a code of conduct, had to be humble, and should devote themselves in the lifestyle of warrior aristocracy. But in the end, they were still soldiers. They indulged in all kinds of perversions, were lazy, fat, undisciplined. Countless brutal crimes were committed by samurais in this period, as some of them felt the power and the necessity to use it. Simply humans. But Jin saw himself as a samurai belonging to a much later period of time. Jin strived for the ideal image of a Bushido type of samurai. It's your stereotypical samurai, so popular in the West especially. This ideal was created by Nitobe Inaza, the author of the book Bushido, The Soul of Japan, which was written and published in 1899. Nitobe describes the virtues that samurai must possess, like politeness, sincerity, honor, and loyalty, and many others. Also, it described the history of samurais and how these moral rules were passed down from generation to generation. The problem is that this depiction had little in common with the real samurais. This book was written in English, published in New York, and only later translated to Japanese. From the beginning, it was a product for experts, for Westerners who knew nothing about Japan. Upon reaching Japan, this book received a wave of harsh criticism, as it didn't represent Japanese culture at all. Nitobe Inaza was a Christian and portrayed samurais as medieval Christian knights, though crusaders weren't good guys either. The book boomed in the West and gained a lot of readers. This image of these fantasy samurais is what lives in minds and in popular culture of the so-called Western world now. Thousands of stupid TikToks and videos with quotes from the famous samurais, The Last Samurai, and other Western works of art do only harm by promoting essentially bullshit about Japan. But what is even worse is that in the second half of the 20th century, this book gained traction in Japan, and this myth spread its popularity there too. Nationalists promoted this myth as a part of a unique Japanese identity. It went even further, and some people proposed to integrate these principles in the educational process in schools. This unattainable myth of the ideal samurai also lives in Jin's head. He tries to live according to these principles, especially loyalty and honor. In the very first episode, Jin taunts the daimyo's guard by asking, For Jin, loyalty is the highest virtue a samurai can possess, but if you're loyal to someone less virtuous than you, it insults your honor as a samurai. In the last episodes, we meet Kariya Kagetoki, the legendary warrior who serves the shogunate. He comes to claim their lives for reasons I'll speak about when discussing Fu. Jin despises him because But how honorable is Jin in reality? He often speaks in stereotypical teenager/samurai phrases, but they're empty and pompous. Mugen mocks Jin that even fishing for him is a life and death struggle between man and fish. He calls his swords the embodiment of a warrior's soul, and rejects to pawn them off, even when they are facing extreme hunger, but uses them in a street performance and gambles his own life, just to play a strategy game. He wears stylish glasses, but they are just for showing off. There's no problem with his vision. He doesn't see any candidate worthy of serving, but it leaves him completely alone. He goes on a journey with Fu because he owes her, but he isn't a good guardian. Fu is constantly endangered or even captured, so he repeatedly fails in his job. When Mugen goes off on a love spree, he takes Jin with him, and Jin silently indulges into lust and alcohol, though it isn't up to his ideal samurai standard. He bears multiple contradictions that hinder his life. He asks the swordsman monk Zuiko about the essence of being a samurai.
人は本来自由に生まれてくるものであり、何かに従うために生まれてきたんじゃない。武士の本分とは相反することではないのでしょうか。
This moment reveals his frustration and puzzled state of mind. He's completely lost in this life and doesn't have any clear way out. Nothing illustrates Jin's internal conflict more than his relationship with Shina. In episode 11, Gamblers and Gallantry, Jin meets a woman, Shina, who are thinking about suicide after her husband sold her into the brothel to cover his gamble debt. On her last free day, she helps Jin at an eel shop, because cooking, fishing, cleaning are all very foreign concepts for him. Jin falls in love with her, but she's taken to the brothel, and he's forced to just observe her from the outside. He even borrows money from Mugen just to spend one night with her. In the end, he convinces Shina to escape from the brothel and stay in a sanctuary. But there's a difficult dilemma. If he goes with Shina to the sanctuary, he would leave Fu and break his promise to her. Initially, he ignores Fu's efforts to stop him. However, in the end, after Fu and Mugen assist them in escaping, he chooses to leave Shina alone on a boat to the sanctuary. It's an incredibly sad and beautiful episode that highlights Jin's internal struggles. He's constantly torn between his emotions and desires on one hand and his senses of duty and the ideal image of the samurai on the other. He can't choose any side, and in the end, he gets nothing. As much as Jin tries to belittle Mugen by calling him filthy and uncultured, they are much more alike than it seems at first. He lost his parents early and spent his childhood devoting all his time to training in the dojo. After being betrayed by his teacher, who was basically a father figure for him, Jin was left with nothing in his life. He wanders Japan without any purpose, and the only thing he is doing, just like Mugen, is fighting with whoever's on his way. He cannot help himself and involves himself with a rivalry with Mugen, even if it's against his beliefs. His past and belief system doesn't allow Jin to start living, so how can he break free from this vicious cycle of unattainable image and false expectations? In the same episode Mugen met Okuro, Jin had his own fateful encounter. Jin meets Yukimaru, a student in the same dojo, and Jin's Kohai, who seeks to assassinate Jin. At this stage of Samurai Champloo, he just falls into the line of being one of the many Avengers that Jin has met previously. Yukimaru hadn't been able to beat Jin a single time in training before, and this time he wasn't lucky either. Near the death door, after Jin slain him, Yukimaru confesses the real reason for his pursuit of Jin. He didn't want revenge, he wanted to be like Jin. To him, Jin was the ideal samurai, but the audience and Jin himself understand how far this statement is from the truth. The whole idea of being a true samurai shatters in front of Jin, as his student sacrificed his life in a futile attempt to be like him. So what should Jin do next with his life? Striving for greatness and absolute loyalty were the only thing Jin was thinking about. First, we as humans shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. Then maybe we will be able to look around ourselves and see someone important, someone who you spend all your time with, someone who really cares about you. Like who, for example? Finally, it's the turn for the best girl. While the boys are struggling to find their place in the world, Fu assembled the team, though quite a shitty one, to achieve her goal, to find the Sunflower Samurai. So who is the Sunflower Samurai, and why Fu is ready for such a valiant effort to find him? We find Fu in the first episode working as a waiter for her relatives in the small tea shop. She seems unfit for the job, rude with customers and clumsy. which I, as a clumsy guy, can appreciate. When the tea shop got burned as a result of Mugen and Jin's role, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise for Fu. She can finally leave the place to find the samurai who smells of sunflowers. At first, we as viewers and even her bodyguards don't know where they're going, while Fu actively avoids the questions about him. We received the first clue about the mysterious samurai from the Dutch trader in Edo. He saw the Fu's dagger with a little skull charm on it and directed them to Nagasaki, the city in western Japan. Also, he warned Fu not to show this charm to anyone. From this moment on, we are starting to discover the truth, step by step. During the brief conflict between Fu and Mugen, we found out that Fu is looking for the Sunflower Samurai for revenge. Then we found out that the charm actually originated from the Christian settlements. Now it smells trouble. When they almost reach their destination, Fu reveals the truth about the identity of the Sunflower Samurai. The school charm was given to Fu by her dying mother. Near the death door, her mother told Fu about her father and handed to her some of his belongings. Fu thought that her father was long dead, but now she understands that he just left them alone and can still be alive. Even though her mother didn't feel any anger towards him, Fu does and wants to avenge her mother. The problem is that Fu is not the only one who is looking for him. Who else? The shogunate, of course. Fu was followed by the shogunate on all their way through Japan. The shogunate was looking for Seize Kazumi, one of the leaders of the Shimabara rebellion, and a devoted Christian. Unfortunately for Fu and her safety, this man is her father, and the shogunate traced him using Fu. They ordered the execution of him and anyone associated, including Fu, Mugen, and Jin. Why is the shogunate so interested in finding him? We need to take a look at Japan's history again. We can write off the hostility of the shogunate towards Christianity to the simple disdain of something alien, but it's more complicated in reality. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the first shogun, didn't have strong feelings towards the foreigners, and even had a foreign counselor, unlike his successor who closed the country entirely. But even Tokugawa Ieyasu was already hostile towards Christians. During the Warring States period, Jesuit missionaries arrived at the shores of Japan and Christianity started spreading quite quickly. At its peak, Christianity had around 500,000 followers around Japan, mostly concentrated near the Nagasaki area. Some daimyos embraced Christianity as a political force to oppose those in power. So the shogun saw the Christians as his political rivals. William Adams, the Ieyasu's advisor, recommended getting rid of Christianity because Spain and Portugal had a big influence on the Catholic Church and could affect the internal politics. Which, if we look at world history, is not wrong at all. Just look at colonial history of Western Europe. So at 1620, the shogunate banned Christianity and started actively persecuting Christians. The persecution was accompanied with the usual suspects: public paranoia, executions, and tortures. The culmination of this bloody persecution became the Shimabara Rebellion, the largest civic conflict during the Edo period. The uprising started in 1637 in the Shimabara domain. Local peasants were struggling because of the overtaxation of the local lords, which led to the multiple famines. The impoverished peasants were in a desperate place, which led to the outbreak of the uprising. Soon they were joined by local Ronins, who lost all the political power and wanted to take back their political place. The rebels took the Hara castle and then held the siege in the castle for a few months, but still were crushed by the overwhelming shogunate forces. The shogunate didn't take a rebellion lightly, and as usual, violently dealt with all the participants. The interesting part is that the main reasons of the uprising didn't have a lot in common with Christianity, and more with the local policies, but due to their geographical location, a big part of peasants and Ronins were Christians, and the revolt was labeled as Christian revolt, and Christians were labeled as traitors. So when Fu was simply inquiring about the Sunflower Samurai all around Japan, she accidentally became the opponent of the shogunate. Also, her company of the Ryuken and the dangerous Ronin didn't help either. But what is fascinating is that, unlike Mugen or Jin, Fu chose the life of an outsider herself. Yes, she didn't know that her father was the shogunate's target, or that she would be followed by the shogunate. Yeah, I'm tired of saying shogunate so much too. But she still chose a riskier way of life. She had the opportunity to stay with her aunt and uncle and find a new place where she can continue to live peacefully and be a waiter somewhere else, but instead she chose to trust two psychos and have a journey across the country. Why did she decide for such a risky move? There's a lazy answer. Because she's a teenager. She's noticeably younger than Mugen and Jin, and it's implied that she's around 16 years old. So is this teenage rebellious spirit that drives Fu? I don't think so, although it's somewhat present in her character. What's more important is that she doesn't like the norms of society and isn't ready to comply with them. Fu clearly disagrees with the stale conventions of femininity. Throughout the series, she was captured multiple times for a sex trade, but she didn't conform to it like other female side characters and fought for her freedom. She even was ready to look unattractive to sway the undesired male attention, but at the same time, she's insecure about her attractiveness. She wants to be seen as an adult woman and tries her charm on Jin and Mugen, but only receives nasty remarks about her appearance. She doesn't have any romantic interest in them, but just wants an acceptance. She goes out of her way to show that she can be attractive too and tries to provoke some jealousy in them, but falls flat. She feels in the shadow of other hypersexualized female characters in the show. In a way, she expected to look like and behave like a standard female anime character, a perfect foil for a brave hero, filled with fan service and affection to the powerful samurais ahead of her, and be a stepping stone for a true hero's journey. Fuck that, she's the main character, it's her journey, and it's Mugen and Jin who are following her on this journey. They are her followers, and not the other way around. She is not just a side character who has some contribution to the story. She is the story, and she chooses how to write her own story. She, unlike Mugen and Jin, writes her story on empathy and creating bonds with people, being attentive to their needs, and in this way, she is very different from them. On a side note, until we move further, I don't know where to put one of her characterizations, so I put it here. Throughout the series, there's this running gag about Fu's eating habits and how she can eat endlessly. In one of the episodes, she's almost won the eating contest, and in the other, Mugen and Jin cannot comprehend the amount that she can devour. It might be one more thing to add to her not fitting the usual feminine image. We see how Fu approaches social interactions from the very beginning of the series. Mugen and Jin are positioned as lone wolves, but Fu is not alone. She travels with the pet, the flying squirrel Momo. But her kindness doesn't stop at animals, it spreads to people as well. Every town they attend, Fu manages to find new friends. People are reaching out to her and value her. How does she achieve it? The answer is simple. She treats people as her equals, doesn't care about any social markers like a position in society, appearance, and sees through them right to their personality. In the episode 2, Red Eye Reprisal, Fu was captured by the disfigured man Oniwakaru, but to his shock, Fu wasn't afraid of him and saw him not as an ogre, but as a sad human being. In the episode 8, she was captured as a hostage by a street thief, but she still tried to help him to escape the local drug lords and police because he was doing thieving to save his dying mother. Unfortunately, sometimes her kindness leads to all kinds of troubles. She's constantly getting captured or endangered. What does constantly mean? Let's count the episodes where Fu is in some trouble. These episodes are episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 16, 19, and the episodes where Fu was hunted by the shogunate are episodes 20, 21, 24, 25, 26. Total of 14 episodes, so more than half of the show. Episode 5, Artistic Anarchy. She agreed to have her portrait drawn by the artist, but he lured her into his house where she was captured to be sold into sex trade. Episode 19, she hid the Christian girl to save her from being imprisoned, but ended up being imprisoned with her. But Fu doesn't give up and goes on her journey no matter what. She's not pacifying, she's electrifying. In episode 3, when she was captured yet again and got into the brothel, she didn't accept her position like the rest of the women there and escaped the brothel. Fu is clearly unhappy with the injustice she's seeing around her. She sees the violence, especially towards women, the poverty, famines, and the absolute hopelessness of her position in class and gender hierarchy. But she doesn't just succumb to it and silently waiting for her imminent death. She feels anger and the desire to resist the temptation to give up and live just like a normal human being. Her anger fuels her, and what target can be better than her missing father? Fucking daddy issues. She cannot forgive that he left her and her mother alone against this violent world. Her mother suffered and died, and there was no one by her side but Fu. Her father is the encapsulation of all the wrong this world can offer, so she goes straight to kick his ass. But after the brutal months of traveling, after all the danger, after all the hunger, she found a dying weak man, crippled to the bed. The mighty Sunflower Samurai, who she dreamed about, turns out to be not able to fight against Fu in any shape or form. What's even worse is that he is himself not some kind of irresponsible villain, but the victim of the same system, and left the family so they wouldn't be hunted by the shogunate. She was traced and basically led the shogunate, or Karen in this case, and witnessed how her father was murdered. She didn't wish him any good before, but now only grief is left. In the end, she was trying to find her father not because of the revenge, but because it's the only family she has left. From all the reasons I talked about earlier, which are still valid and important for her, the true reason for the journey is not to be alone, and she isn't very different from Mugen and Jin in this regard. This video is getting cyclical, isn't it? Fu hired Mugen and Jin to be her bodyguards, but they are not doing their job properly. I can repeat again how many times she was captured if needed. Already in episode 3, they were separated for the first time, and her shitty bodyguards kept leaving her in danger all the time. Their pairing together seems improbable, but they somehow make it work. Their relationship almost ended over another squabble about their destination, but they could not just go separate ways without fulfilling Fu's goal. Just like Mugen and Jin, Fu had her important encounter in episodes 16 and 17. With who? Okuro, the people's MVP. Fu was going to travel alone, but Okuro rightfully points out that
一度共に旅をした者は家族や兄弟と同じだ。
Jin and Mugen can be cold-hearted jerks, but despite their weaknesses and shortcomings, they are traveling together, and Fu is able to accept them as they are, because they are not all alone. They have each other. The transformation of our main characters happens after many fateful encounters and unfortunate circumstances during their journey. So who do they meet? Maybe some local lords or samurais, and they would help them in their political fights? Mugen, Jin and Fu are outcasts, so they are meeting outcasts as well. The setting of the show isn't some beautiful imperial castles or private gardens. It's dirty, poor neighborhoods, underworld gambling houses, brothels and abandoned shacks. But it's not only the setting. The people who help them in their journey or intervene with it are all from the bottom of the class system. They meet different Yakuza gangs, street artists, fortune tellers, a blind musician, Christians, foreigners, a monk legion and other marginalized groups of Japanese society. The only time they had to meet officials outside the first episode and the last ones is when they had to deal with the corrupt checkpoint officials. But nothing symbolizes the outcast nature of this journey more than their constant companion across all the episodes, the hunger. They are completely broke, and the hunger significantly slows down their journey. They are forced to meddle with the Yakuza to feed themselves, and their illegal earners are often the reason for all kinds of troubles. They are not shiny samurais, and the food becomes the main value in their journey, not honor or bravery in fight. They took part-time assignments to be janitors, retainers for Yakuza lords, city guides, or anything at all, just to earn for a meal and a shelter. Of course, they also aren't ashamed of stealing from thugs. They're not the saints after all. By putting the series in this historical period, authors of the series totally subvert the expectation of the usual samurai story and expose the romantic narratives of the ideal past. Not only Jin and Mugen are living under the shadow of the past, the viewers are doing it too. Samurai Champloo's Edo Japan is not only a time of gracious samurais and iconic art, it's also a time of authoritative government and misery, sufferings, social injustice. Even the legendary hero Miyamoto Musashi behaves and looks like a playful ogre here. The creators of the show uncover the stories of forgotten voices to show that Japan is a much more multifaceted country than petite nationalists want it to be. These voices are important, and the viewers should care about them. Otherwise, you are just rehashing the past and striving for something that never existed. Episode 22, Cosmic Collisions, is an episode where the idea of the non-existent past is explored the most. When I first watched this anime, I couldn't understand why we have this episode after some major episode plot-wise. It seemed like a surreal filler which breaks the tension of the previous episodes. Looking now at Reddit, this episode is the least liked among the fans and considered to be the weakest, but I understand now that this is clearly connected with the whole idea of Samurai Champloo. What's it about? Mugen and Jin ate the mushrooms, good start, and then fell through the hole to the excavation site, where they met Heike Shige. He claims that he's a descendant of the prominent Heike clan and looking for his family treasure, which would help him to overthrow the shogunate. He also claims that they've been digging for the treasure for the last 5 years and will find it soon, so he offers them part of the treasure for their help in finding it. They've started working in a mine and soon lost track of time. Mugen and Jin became absolutely uninterested in their life, and only Fu, who didn't eat the mushrooms, is in her right mind. She tries to escape, but is stopped by the workers, who turn out to be zombies that are eating wasabi roots to preserve their bodies from rotting. Shige orders an army of zombies to kill Fu, so she will join their ranks. But Jin finds a scroll with Heike lineage, which proves that Shige is unrelated to the Heike clan. Also, Fu finds out that Shige wants to overthrow Kamakura shogunate and not Tokugawa shogunate, which means that they were digging for 500 years and not 5. Zombies couldn't take this offense, so they attacked Shige, who just before his death looks at the camera and shouts. And then meteor falls and leaves a nuclear mushroom. What can I say, it's a wild episode. Shige, in a way, is an extreme version of both Mugen and Jin. He wants to avenge his clan and overthrow the government, but he is so obsessed about his past that he completely lost track of time and then lost his humanity. He is not dead, but he is not alive either, he is just a shell of himself. In one moment, Shige tells Fu that this place is perfect to forget the troubles of the floating world. That is his manifestation of his way of life. He is working for some mythical future, for some mythical reasons in the past. He sacrificed his life and assembled the army of zombies so he would be preoccupied with digging and wouldn't need to think anymore. At the end of the episode, he breaks the fourth wall and addresses the audience, as if telling them that it's not real and all fiction. With this episode, anime screams at us that the past is not an escapism tool from the real-life problems. Politicians use the romantic past in their interests all the time and manipulate it to construct beneficial narratives. There's no ideal past, and there's no use to constantly look back on it. The ideal Japan didn't exist, the ideal samurais didn't exist, and Samurai Champloo clearly tells that this way leads to discarding the historical details, oppressing the minorities, and losing humanity. Petite nationalists used the past as a shield to hide from their everyday issues, while Japanese politicians and media companies used the petite nationalists to impose their chauvinistic narratives and earn billions from them later. Fu, Mugen and Jin are the victims of this idea and fight against the authorities for their freedom. But what else can authors of Samurai Champloo offer instead of these nationalistic ideas? In the previous parts of this video, I've described the world of Samurai Champloo, and if you didn't see this anime before, from my description you would expect this series to have a very bleak outlook. The authors certainly wanted to show the darker side of Edo Japan, but it's not the first show to do it. The bloody samurai shows are popular and have very rich history in Japanese cinematography. The whole genre, Chanbara, which stands for samurai films, started from the silent films era, and especially got popular in 1970s, right when Nihon Genron got popular too, and I don't know if it's an accident or not. The movies like The 47 Ronin or Seven Samurai are well known and revered worldwide. What makes Samurai Champloo unique is how it blends these Chanbara tropes and multiple other aesthetics together. I've already described in length how it's manifested in main characters, but Shinichiro Watanabe hadn't stopped at main characters. In his previous work, Cowboy Bebop, he mixed space opera with spaghetti western and spiced it up with the unforgettable jazz soundtrack. Samurai Champloo received the same treatment. This idea of mixing different aesthetics comes from the very name of the series. The word Champloo is an Okinawan word, which means the method of cooking, to stir fry. You throw every ingredient you have in a frying pot, mix it together, and get a new kind of stew every time. So what's in Samurai Champloo's pot? Samurai drama, obviously. Also, we have an addition of non-Japanese characters and their cultures, Okinawan and Ainu. And coming straight from the west, Watanabe adds hip-hop culture and street culture into the mix. Hip-hop soundtrack is the first thing mentioned when Samurai Champloo is brought up. It's the main reason why it's got so popular in the West. From the beginning of each episode, the viewers are met with the best opening of all time, at least in my opinion. It visually introduces our protagonists, metaphorically shows their characters, and enthralls with absolutely stylish imagery into the Champloo atmosphere. One more thing, it has the ultimate opening song, produced by the legendary hip-hop musician Nujabes, featuring a Japanese-American rapper Shin02, Battle Cry serves as a perfect introduction to what comes next. Shin Zero 2 raps over the minimalistic beat about the bloody way of the samurai, which mirrors the way of our heroes. And it's just an opening song. The most well-known name behind this soundtrack is Nujabes. At the time he was an unknown underground producer from Japan, but after the release of Samurai Champloo, he gained a whole new audience and popularity abroad. Now he's considered to be the godfather of the lo-fi hip-hop. I don't think he himself thought that he's making lo-fi hip-hop, but he's often coined with this genre. His influence on this genre was overshadowed with the lo-fi girl and her beats to relax study to, and that's what lo-fi hip-hop is now. But let's not speak about this tragedy. The hip-hop soundtrack feels like a perfect soundscape for the rebellious samurais. Often melancholic, the soundtrack slowly flows across the series with the sudden bursts of energy in the middle of dramatic events. Nujabes' contribution to the soundtrack is immense, but he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by the team of amazing producers, the underground American producer Fat John and two Japanese producers, Force of Nature and Tsuchi. Every one of them has some incredible highlights across the series, especially Tsuchi, who produced the music for the final third of Champloo alone, due to the lack of budget. The choice for hip-hop aesthetics in combination with samurai drama may feel strange, but only at the first glance. The anime that deals with the themes of social alienation and all kinds of misfits has a lot in common with hip-hop culture, especially with the focus on diversity. I paid a lot of attention to skin color, Watanabe said in one of the interviews. Also to use in multiple languages. Lots of times when you watch anime, the characters have white skin. All the characters in fantasy stories all have white skin, which I never liked. No wonder he chose the music of the oppressed, but at the same time the music of black liberation and black identity. Watanabe wants to show that minorities can fight for their rights, so he connects these cultures together. Essentially, that's how Mugen was created. The way of rappers also influenced me. It is said that Japanese people read between the lines, so that they do not feel out of place and keep their heads down. But I always have the suspicion, like, is it always been so? Is it just the behavior of modern Japanese people? It brought me to create an opposite character, who boasts like a rapper with a microphone, and it should be like a samurai. Hip-hop music is where this anime has started. The important essence of hip-hop is its sampling. A musician can pick up old pieces of music and use them like new. So the thought of being able to use something old, like parts of Chambara movie, in a new way was the starting point for Samurai Champloo. Sampling perfectly encapsulates the concept of Champloo to create something new from the different pieces. Each episode starts with the rolling vinyl with Samurai Champloo name on it, as if every new episode is a new track in this record. We can hear scratch sound effects in between the cuts, and the concept of sampling is fully embraced in the stylistics of Samurai Champloo. Even in the mostly hip-hop soundtrack, there were other elements sampled in the middle of it. I've already talked about the usage of traditional Okinawan and Ainu music, but we also can find melancholic pop songs from the Japanese musician Minmi, which were used for the endings of the show. It's not just the quality of the soundtrack that attracted the viewership so much, it's how skillfully it was implemented in the themes of the series, how natural it sounds. Samurai Champloo looks and feels eclectic, but at the same time, it's the only way it might exist. The action takes place in Edo Japan, but the authors deliberately added things that break the historical logic. Although I spoke a lot about Japanese history in this video, and hopefully I proved my point of the importance of it, the creators were way more interested in expanding the horizons and propelling the idea of multicultural diversity than portraying historically true Japan. One of the ways used to achieve multiculturalism is anachronisms. Anachronism is basically two things that are chronologically or culturally far apart from each other, but tied together. I've already mentioned one of them in the video. It's Jin's Versace glasses that cannot exist in this time period, but are important for the characterization. Anachronisms are just another element in the Champloo mix, and it blends with everything else. Hip-hop soundtrack isn't anachronistic in itself, but it's a part of hip-hop culture in Champloo. In episode 18, War of the Worlds, we meet two twins and their gang. They're street artists and terrorize Hiroshima by painting graffiti all across the city. They have constant fights between each other, and Jin, who studied in their father's dojo, agrees to act as a mediator to finally solve their conflict. The person who can take the most dangerous place will be the winner of the competition. They decided to take the Hiroshima castle, where the local daimyo resides. They climb to the roof of the castle, to paint the graffiti. They were left behind by an unknown artist. The winner of the attacking duel turned out to be Mugen, who climbed to the very top and painted his own graffiti. Was street art used in this episode just as a setting device? Of course not. Their father, the owner of the dojo, was forced to commit ritual suicide due to the power struggles. For the twins, graffiti is the only way they can get back at daimyo for the death of their father. They resist the political and social order and don't conform to the social norms, standing out from the crowd. Their efforts got noticed and they invited to Edo by Japanese Andy Warhol to take over the fashion world. It works the same for Mugen. He entered this series as an illiterate brawler, but he doesn't like that Fu and Jin tease him about his inability to read. During this episode, he learns how to read and write, and then he proudly draws an infinity sign on the roof of the castle. He is able to reclaim his place in the world by writing, and not by brute force. Overall, I can describe Mugen as a b-boy. He is the representative of hip-hop culture in the series. Another anachronism can be found in the episode that is held fondly by a lot of fans. Of course, it's a filler episode about baseball. Americans came to Japan for an open trade. Hopefully, they decided to place baseball with the Japanese first and bet the invasion on it. The only Japanese baseball player at the time assembled a team consisting of Mugen, Jin, Fu, a police officer, an old man, a dog, and a squirrel. In the end, the Japanese team pulls off the victory by Mugen eliminating all the American players with his immense strength. For sure, it's a comedic filler, but it comes with the ideas too. Americans of baseball couldn't be seen near Japan until the end of 18th century, but Shinichiro Watanabe accelerated this process a little bit. From the very first appearance of Americans, we can see the striking difference between two teams. All the American players look almost the same in their baseball suits, while the Japanese team looks completely different. Hey, they even have animals in the team. The striking contrast between the teams is created to point out the different approaches to life, different system of values. The American team is united under their governing body. They play the game because they were ordered by their government, so they all look alike, like cogs of the system. They try to cheat in the game only to get beaten by the Japanese team, whose essence is very individual and builds on their identities. This episode got some hate, as all the Americans looked like caricatures of themselves, and some viewers even called it xenophobic. But I don't think so. He clearly treats American culture with the utmost respect in a lot of his works. My version is that he just mocks his former American producers who constantly intervened with his work on the Animatrix short film. There are other little anachronisms in the show, like Mukuro's revolver, that haven't existed in this era yet, and it was done to emphasize the otherness of these characters, but I won't discuss them, as this video would never end in this case. The idea of a pure culture or a pure language that stays isolated from the various influences seems absurd, especially in today's multicultural world. But it still has a lot of followers in Japan. Samurai Champloo, on the contrary to this idea, uses foreign cultures as an instrument to subvert this pureness. But all the diversity, all the foreign cultures used in Samurai Champloo, is there not only to oppose the existing power system or to show otherness, it's also there to connect different cultures together, to have a dialogue about the nature of Japanese culture in the context of the whole world. Across Samurai Champloo, art functions as an instrument of communication between people. It helps people to express themselves and find some common ground, just like in real life. The influence of Western culture, mostly modern one, on Japanese society is clearly shown in the anime, but it's a two-way street. That's why I discuss Samurai Champloo in English at the end of the day. Traditional Japanese culture can connect us together just as well as modern mass culture, and it can even be the source of inspiration for mass culture. In episode 5, Artistic Anarchy, ukiyo paintings become the center of cultural dialogue. In an attempt to earn money, Fu becomes a model for an artist, Hishikawa Moronobu, and poses for his sunflower painting. Unfortunately for her, the ukiyo shop and all the artist's work is just a front for human trafficking to Europe, so she was abducted once again. Everything turned out to be fine for Fu, but Hishikawa Moronobu set off to Holland so he can be finally accepted as a serious artist. Hishikawa Moronobu was a real Japanese artist, known for popularizing the ukiyo genre and was famous for depicting women in their daily lives. Later, in 19th century Europe, another artistic movement has blossomed that focused on depiction of daily urban life, and that's Impressionism. Shockingly enough, one of the most popular artistic movements was influenced by Japanese ukiyo art, and exactly this connection was drawn in Samurai Champloo. Hishikawa Moronobu failed to get to Holland, but his painting of Fu and sunflowers found its way to Vincent van Gogh. Though this part is fictional, the connection between Van Gogh and ukiyo is completely real. He bought hundreds of ukiyo works, organized an exhibition, and even said that all my work is based to some extent on Japanese art. Instead of protecting the culture at all costs by claiming your supremacy and uniqueness, or even by intentionally isolating Japan from the other world, just like Tokugawa shogunate did when they closed the country, Shinichiro Watanabe builds a bridge with another cultural movement to show how Japan and Japanese culture already intertwined with the world culture, and in this particular case with the mass culture, because what can be more pop cultural than Van Gogh? But the influence of Japan isn't limited to pop culture. People find the reflection of their otherness in Japanese culture and deeply connect with it, just like I did. In episode 6, Stranger Searching, Mugen, Jin, and Fu enter the eating competition, but despite their hunger and Fu's endless stomach, they lost to the mysterious red-haired stranger by the name of Joji. Mugen and Jin pawned off their swords in order to enter the competition, so now Joji forces them to have a tourist tour around Eda in exchange for the swords. While showing him a city around, they are getting pursued by the local police, who are searching for the foreigner. Surprise, surprise! Red-haired Joji turned out to be a Dutch diplomat, Isaac Titsing, who was a senior official of the Dutch East India Company in real life, though the dates are lining up once again. The final destination for their tour was Kabuki theater, a form of a traditional theater in Japan. In the Edo period, female actors were banned from participating in Kabuki plays, so all the roles were played by male actors. Onagata is the term used for the male actors who play female roles in Kabuki theater. Joji, or Isaac, went backstage to see one of the Onagata actors, and there he confesses that he's gay. He was treated like a deviant back in Holland, but then he found a book, a piece of traditional Japanese literature, The Great Mirror of Male Love, by Ihara Seikaku. It's a collection of short stories about homoerotic relationships between samurais, monks, and kabuki actors, with occasional sprinkles of misogyny here and there. Inspired by the book, Isaac set off to Japan, but he is not accepted in Japan as well. To his shock, the reason he is basically hunted isn't his homosexuality, but because he is a foreigner. Edo period Japan completely lacked Christian ethics, so public opinion on gay relationships were quite positive, especially on male ones. It was widely spread in samurai class, as a lot of them received their education in Buddhist monasteries, where the idea of nanshoku was really popular. Nanshoku can be roughly translated as male love, so samurais weren't ashamed to have sex with each other, especially if you took a young apprentice and taught him all the intricacies of adult life. One of the most widely known samurais, Miyamoto Musashi, had a few beloved retainers. I would really like to see the faces of the Jin bros when they get to know the other side of their hero. Later, exactly in Tokugawa Japan, the city started to grow with the overflowing stream of samurais, which led to the rise of popularity of male prostitutes, who also often were kabuki actors. Isaac's passion towards traditional Japanese art led to his admiration of Japan as a whole. Traditional Japanese values are way more inclusive and friendly to people than so-called purists want it to be. It's another way that builds connections between people from all over the world. Authors of the anime coined the term Bushido, the way of the samurai, with homosexuality. It has nothing to do with the uniqueness of Japan or the fantasy look from the book Bushido, the Soul of Japan. The philosophy of Bushido is built on rectitude, selfness, and respect of a male group, which has much in common with the path of male love. That's a direct quote from the anime, which completely crushes the stereotypes of samurais. The so-called defendants of the Japanese purity are completely ignoring this part of Japanese history and defending public shame towards LGBTQA movements. The negative view towards gay relationships became popular during the Meiji Restoration. The Meiji government completely adopted the ideas of Western imperialism in an attempt to modernize the country. So ironically, petite nationalists and right-wingers of all sorts aren't defending the uniqueness of the Japanese nation and its culture. They are defending Western influence on Japanese culture that they despise so much. Art cannot exist in vacuum, in this safe conservative space without outer influences. Art feeds off people's experiences, and these experiences aren't one-dimensional, and they don't exist only to serve the ideology of the current political regime. The idea that you can just close the country and nothing will go through, and you will keep the purity of your culture is completely foolish, especially in modern society. Just as foolish is the concept that your nation or culture is so special that no one outside of it can fully comprehend it or take part in it in any shape or form. What it only does is alienate small cultures or small social groups and erases them from any cultural discourse. Samurai Champloo does the opposite of that. Samurai Champloo welcomes a variety of cultures to speak about things we all have in common, but at the same time showing our differences, and what is even more important, appreciating our differences. My cultural background is very different from the authors of the anime. When I was a teenager, you could get punched in the face for liking anime. But I am not just a cultural product of my surroundings. I am not completely defined by my national identity. Samurai Champloo reflects my own experience, despite being culturally alien to me. In the end, despite all the cultural differences, all the fragmented experiences, we ended up in the same cultural bowl, connected by this wonderful piece of art. You, the viewer of this video, can watch it from any part of the world and still understand what I am trying to say, despite the differences in nationalities or cultures. We are just pieces of a stir-fry dish named world culture, and Samurai Champloo celebrates this fact while trying to maintain its unique identity of a local culture. Japanese culture is Champloo. This video is Champloo. I am Champloo. Finally, we are closing in to the end of this colossal video, just like Fu in her search for Sunflower Samurai. That's the last part. Although I spent a lot of time in this video discussing Japanese history and means of breaking the idea of homogeneous Japan, Samurai Champloo is about humans and their interactions first and foremost. So let's talk about humans. In the previous part of the video, I was talking about the mix of different cultures, so no wonder this mix has produced a colorful cast of characters. Their outcast nature isn't just a part of their behavior, but also shows itself in their appearance. Each of the main characters have their own fashion style, but all the side characters have some uniqueness in them too. Even if their clothes reflect the traditional Japanese clothing, there will be one special detail in their looks. Baseball coach Kagemaru flexes in orange sunglasses. Eccentric samurai rapper Nagamitsu wears purple hakama with the flames. Mukuru has a bright yellow shirt, I guess. My knowledge on Japanese clothing is really lacking. If not clothes, then their makeup or hairstyle or personal accessories. There usually is something peculiar about each side character. They are not just a function or a background for the noble samurais to do their heroic deeds. Even if they don't really have time on the screen, they still have bits of quirky personality. In classic samurai movies, only samurais are important to the plot, therefore mostly samurais are noble characters. Samurai Champloo certainly isn't one of them. The authors appreciate all the characters and give their time to shine. Regardless of your social status or nationality, you're a person first, and you act according to your motivation and personality, not some genre cliché. The construction of this Chanbara trope is especially visible in Samurai Champloo because of the side characters. Despite their harsh social conditions and horrific circumstances forced upon them, a lot of them still choose to be kind-hearted human beings. Take Oniwa Kamaru from episode 2. He was ostracized and harassed in his village just because of his disfigured face. He lost control of himself and killed everybody who bullied him. He is a truly tragic character who was traumatized and now is only used as a murder weapon. When Fu approaches him and treats him as a human being and not a monster, he chose to save her and kill her attacker, which cost him his life. Or Shinsuke from episode 7. He had to steal so he could afford buying medicine for his dying mother, so he didn't even have a chance to have a normal life. He stole an opium from the local pusher and became a target of the mob. He took Fu as a hostage so he can escape from the police, but sets her free later and even promises to repay her later. Just like Oniwa Kamaru, he wasn't able to escape and was murdered by the police. Social alienation forces people to commit crimes just to make ends meet and leaves all kinds of traumatic experience which drastically changes your life. Oniwa Kamaru and Shinsuke were able to conserve their kindness, but some characters just fell into the void of carelessness and violence. Koza, the childhood friend of Mugen, experienced the hellhole of Ryukyu Prison Island. All this traumatic experience just transformed her into a master manipulator. When Mugen kills everybody around her and leaves her alone, she can't fight anymore and begs Mugen to kill her. She was treating every person like a tool for survival, so when there were no tools left, she felt abandoned, without any will to continue living. But not a single character in the show encapsulates a tragic life story of violence and abuse and still living your own life with kindness more than Sarah. Our protagonists meet her at a small restaurant, performer on the stage. She is a Goethe, a blind traveling musician playing the 3-string lute. Needless to say, their social rank was really low, and they often were victims of all kinds of abuse. To prevent that, they traveled in groups and even created multiple professional organizations, similar to guilds, to protect themselves. They were a very discreet organization with a strict moral code. For example, any contact with men was forbidden, and pregnant members even could be expelled. Sarah was traveling alone, so she asked Fu and the boys to join her in exchange for food and shelter. Sarah became their first and last addition to the group, and rather quickly grew to like them, especially Mugen. While traveling, we get to know that she has a child, but left him because...
見えないんじゃ親なんて務まらないもの
At one moment, Sarah asks Fu to let Mugen or Jin come with her, so she can rejoin her child. Sarah divided their group so she can lure them into her trap, one by one. You see, she is an assassin and was ordered to kill them by the shogunate, so they wouldn't be able to finish their journey. In the process of a few beautifully crafted fights, she completely destroys Jin and Mugen, and we find out that the shogunate basically blackmails Sarah into murdering them, so they would spare her child's life. Throughout the series, Mugen and Jin are presented as if they are immovable objects. They are so strong. But Sarah possesses even greater strength and is even more skilled swordsman. It's not a sword, but you get the idea. But this strength didn't help her to fit in the society. She is still an outcast. She's been denied the possibility to be a mother because of her role as a Goethe, but she is clearly longing for motherhood. She's another character who was driven to the edges of society and who lost the ability to control her life despite her exceptional skills. When she joined the company of her future targets, she became a part of a group of outsiders, just like her, and she was completely accepted without any unnecessary questions. She stopped being alone and started to have fun. Sarah and Mugen really got along, they understood each other without words. But military authoritarian governments benefit only the top of the social ladder and casually oppress cultural and social minorities in the process. These governments, completely incapable of appreciating human life, but successfully destroy it only for the sake of some manipulative goals. Sarah became a victim of this oppressive system and faced an impossible choice: to kill the people who became important for her, otherwise her child would be murdered. But she is no samurai, she is just a blind woman, so she is forced to endure all these hardships alone. After another blackmail attempt, she came to the sudden realization that her son is already dead and she is just being used. Losing her child broke her spirit, so she let Mugen defeat and kill her in the end. Sarah is a really tragic character. We see her fight against unfair and cruel circumstances that feel like fighting against the whole world. But she is not just this miserable character, despite her disabilities. She's strong and independent. Mugen likes her because she doesn't allow any signs of pity or sympathy towards her. She doesn't want to harm them and tries a few times to stop their journey to prevent any violence. Also, she is not a ruthless killer. She wasn't able to finish off Mugen when he was absolutely helpless. She's just done with the fighting and lost all the reasons to keep going. But she sees the light in Mugen, which even his companions don't really see, and sacrifices her life so he can keep going. Sarah just needed more time together with Fu. She would give her all the strength and all the reasons required. In a way, Fu is the opposite of Sarah. She is physically weak, young and inexperienced, but with a ton of mental fortitude and reasons to move forward no matter what. In the country of repressed women, Fu's rebellious spirit shines really bright. When she got into the brothel, she was the only one who wasn't deflated about this situation, didn't give up like other women there, and escaped without any help. Fu inspires everybody she approaches to resist the oppressive system and live life on your own terms. She hasn't backed off once during the journey, even if it threatens her life. Just look at her relationship with Mugen and Jin, and how it changed them. When we first Mugen and Jin, they were just wandering around Japan aimlessly. Nominally, Mugen was searching for powerful swordsmen to fight with, but in reality, we understand that he was searching for reasons to be alive. After they met Fu, they finally got some sense of purpose to guard her in her search for the Sunflower Samurai. In the beginning of the series, they, though mostly Mugen, are constantly whining that they don't have any reason to follow her and threaten to leave, but no matter what, they come back and travel together. They found a person who needs their help, who needs protection, And what's most important, who needs them in her life and really cares about them. That's something Mugen and Jin haven't really experienced before. But that's not the only reason to stick around Fu. She isn't lost despite all the difficulties she is facing. Fu doesn't look back at her past constantly and just keeps pushing forward. Jin, on the other hand, is entirely consumed by his past. He couldn't get over his master's betrayal and doesn't really trust people, but desperately wants these connections. Mugen is a similar case. He grew up in a place where he couldn't trust anybody, then was betrayed by the people who he considered to be his friends, and now cannot form any type of meaningful relationship. What can the future possibly hold for Ryuken Outlaw and the Ronin who killed his own master? This future looks depressing and gloomy, and the worst thing is that Mugen and Jin believe that it's the only possible future for them. But their journey with Fu is slowly changing them. Jin begins to realize his hidden desire to build relationships. The desire to care about Fu and protect her at any cost takes over his obsession about samurai honor. The burden of insufferable guilt and distrust is no longer the only thing he can feel. He even started speaking with people, though not so much, but still an improvement. Mugen is changing too, although he's a more difficult case. His character arc revolves around the stereotypical image of a brute from Ryukyu Islands. Step by step, he's getting more and more aware that he wants more than just the set of basic needs. During the journey, Mugen became the butt of the jokes due to his inability to read. It wasn't bullying, Jin and Fu aren't so violent, but Mugen still felt shame and his inferiority. When he was teased by the stranger about it, he realized that he wants more and he wants to learn how to read and write. He rejected the notion that his social rank and his Ryuken origin would completely define his fate. He painted the infinity sign graffiti on the roof of the daimyo castle as a symbol of his existence and his intention to push forward the limits of society. In a way, Mugen's graffiti mirrors the original street artist's vision that showed hidden, impoverished layers of society, and these people are not agreeing to be silent anymore. A similar transformation happened to his social life. He didn't really get close to anyone, and saw women mostly as sex objects, until he met Sarah at least. He liked her character, her independence, her resistance for any pity in her inner strength. Her social alienation and loneliness clearly resonated with Mugen. He found a soulmate and started having feelings for her. So when he found out that she tried to assassinate Jin, we can only imagine his pain of her betrayal. He was already extremely cynical in his attitude towards people, but this journey has been softening him up bit by bit, only to leave him in pain and despair again. We could expect his relapse into self-destructive patterns again, but Sarah didn't finish him off the first time they fought and then sacrificed her life so they can keep going on their journey. We can safely assume that Mugen and Jin have a low self-esteem, so when Sarah gave up her life because she believed that Mugen's life is more important than her, and he still has strength to overcome all the obstacles, what a shocking experience it must be for Mugen. He used to the role of a stray dog. He hasn't expected such a belief in his worth from other people. Her willingness to let Mugen go on at all costs inspired him to sacrifice everything for the people important to him, Fu in this case. If you are pressured by society just for the simple fact of your existence, it will be incredibly hard to resist it alone, or even simply survive. Mugen and Jin are one of the best swordsmen in Samurai Champloo. They kill hordes of people, all by themselves, but still incapable of finding their place in this world. Throughout the series, we see how people from different dark corners of Japan connect with each other. The so-called outcasts share experiences and emotions so they can have a meaningful life. The homogeneous system is cold and ruthless, so it can make your life miserable unless you give up an important part of your identity to adapt to it. Our power is in numbers, in people who can understand what you're going through and help. Our power is in cooperation. Main characters became really strong only when they had come together and became close. They started to care about each other and change themselves to build their relationship. Others need each other, a sense of community, friends. We need our own family. Fu, Mugen and Jin got one. There's one moment in Samurai Champloo which perfectly captures their close relationship, a talk around a campfire. That's my favorite scene from the whole anime. Our heroes decided to camp for a night just before reaching their destination that would lead to the end of their journey. Fu dreaded their separation even before this moment, but now it is unavoidable and so close that she starts feeling sentimental.
センチメートル西洋で発見された女の感情だ
She proposed to them to tell one thing about themselves that they kept secret before to get to know each other better. Mugen told them that he doesn't have any secrets and the only thing he can think about is his murder of some important shogunate official. Jin and Fu got more personal. Jin told them about his childhood, loneliness and hopeless wanderings in an attempt to find something that he had no idea what it was about. Fu told them about her anger towards her father and an idea to avenge her mother. She is incredibly grateful to Jin and Mugen for taking this journey with her and helping her along the way. That's a very touching moment for the characters. Lonely in their lives, they are not used to sharing their feelings with someone else, but at this moment they are not alone and can share it with each other, and they understand that this moment is important. This conversation differs from their other squabbles. There are no interruptions or jokes, they are telling their stories calmly and listening to each other. It doesn't sound like a lot, but for them it's their first candid conversation. After a long journey together, they can finally appreciate everything that they've done for each other. They have a special bond between them now, something they hadn't had before they met. Unfortunately, it's not all sweet and happy. Their journey is coming to an end, and they will separate and go their own way alone. What Fu is really scared about is that Jin and Mugen will start fighting with each other as soon as they break apart. They all feel that something important is ending, and now everything should come back to the lonely and miserable place as it was before. Or should it? They believed that they didn't deserve a better life. But what about now? Jin and Mugen's life finally started to have some semblance of meaning. They can protect Fu in her quest to find her father. Jin and Mugen are no longer just rogues who can't have any family. They already have Fu. The only thing that is left is that they need to accept what or who is really important to them. So when Fu was attacked and captured at the end of Samurai Champloo, they cut the bullshit and did what's necessary to protect her. Mugen, who swore that the only important thing in his life is to keep fighting and fight somebody who's stronger than him, is leaving Kariya Kagetoki, this legendary warrior who was whooping his ass and he sprang behind to help Fu. Then he gave away his sword and was tortured just so Fu could finish her journey. Such selflessness wasn't a part of his character before, and his style of fighting has changed too. He still used the environment in the battle, but he didn't provoke or tease his opponents. It was a cold-blooded efficiency that allowed him to defeat them, very uncharacteristic for the previous versions of Mugen. Jin had a similar experience. He was gravely injured by Kariya, but still came back to defend Fu. He is no longer motivated by the samurai's honor or the ideals of the samurai's hierarchy. He doesn't serve her, she is a part of his family. Jin is free from these notions now, and just look at how the reformed person looks like. His hair is untied, his dress is in shambles, but he's not interested in the neat image of samurais at the moment. He's finally liberated from all the norms that were assigned to his social status and were holding him back his whole life. He committed his life to learning sword arts, but in his own admission, he's using this power for someone else's sake for the first time in his life. And the manner of defeating Kariya shows his newly founded resolve. Unlike all the fighting conventions, he allows himself to be struck so he can kill his opponent, who didn't expect it coming. Very risky and even suicidal approach for someone like Jin. Mugen and Jin finally were able to brush the social expectations of them. Jin isn't an ideal samurai, and Mugen isn't a Ryukan barbarian. They are not a set of fixed characteristics according to their social class. Authors of Samurai Champloo observed the petite nationalist tendencies in the society and created main characters who are struggling the most from these imposed norms of behavior. But instead of succumbing to these norms, they challenge them, and not through the fighting, but by embracing their differences and building relationships. They, and by they I mean Fu too, were able to change their fates by accepting their desires such as affection and human warmth. They killed their opponents and accompanied Fu to her father. The goal of Mugen and Jin's journey was accomplished, so there's nothing stopping the duel between them anymore. Except they don't need to fight anymore. When half-dead Mugen and Jin finally clashed, their swords broke into pieces as a symbol of their new lives. They broke the cycle of pointless and fruitless fighting. That's basically a reason for creating this video. The characters and their story resonated with my own way of being an immigrant. For a while I felt that my country was getting occupied and the culture was getting destroyed, so I left my homeland. After living abroad, I slowly came to the realization that there's no home where I can return to. But it's not like I found a new home. Living in another country without speaking a local language feels really alienating. And that's exactly the time I watched Samurai Champloo. The way main characters overcame their challenges inspired me to start a YouTube channel. I thought about it and planned it for years, but always postponed it till the better times would come. They never came. Sharing my story and exploring the themes of Samurai Champloo is my way of resisting the systems that are destroying my culture and the way to tackle alienation. I am the other, just as many characters in Samurai Champloo, and just as lots of people in this world. I believe that showing and celebrating our experiences can slowly change the traditional and outdated image of the homogeneous society that the politicians in power are so desperate to preserve. I am terrified to share my thoughts in the form of video publicly and especially in English. I'm not that confident in my writing and editing skills. I'm unsure if someone would be ready to watch this insufferably long video with my funny Eastern European accent, but Fu was brave enough to go for a journey through the whole of Japan, so I think I can't let her down, and I must follow my desires despite the fear I have. So let's finish our journey. Fu reached her destination and met her father, only to lose him right after. She wanted vengeance, but found a small and frail man incapable of defending himself. Fu was able to see him as a person who didn't want to endanger his family and sacrificed everything for his religious beliefs. She is finally able to forgive him and emotionally reconcile with him, though only after his tragic death. He was her only family and she wanted to reunite with him. She lost her father, but in the journey that was designed to find the only person that Team might care about her, she accidentally found a new family in Mugen and Jin. By the way, what about them? There is no battle left for them anymore. It's time for confessions. Jin and Mugen are lying on the floor of Fu's father's house, healing their wounds. They are so badly injured, they cannot move at all, and now fully depend on Fu's care to regenerate. So the only thing they can do is pour their heart out to each other. Mugen accepts that he doesn't want to fight and kill Jin anymore, even if Jin is tougher than him. Baby steps, I know. Jin shares that they are his first friends that he was searching for all this time. They are a new reformed people, and Samurai Champloo showed this transformation. Jin lost his glasses, a symbol of his samurai identity, which was completely hollow and lacked any substance. Mugen lost his colorful scabbard, the annoying reminder of his tragic past. They finally got out of the cage of loneliness, and Fu was the one who opened the door for them. Their journey has ended. Now, when their journey is over, what's next? That's where the infamous bittersweet ending of Samurai Champloo comes over. Our main characters stand at the literal crossroads and are deciding to go each separate way alone. When I watched different video essays about Samurai Champloo, the common interpretation of this ending is quite sad and depressing. It revolves around the different stages of your life, how you meet important people, how they change you, and when you enter a new stage of your life, you separate them and then find a new family. I don't agree with this interpretation. The end goal of their journey was achieved, though there is no reason to continue traveling together. They've changed, they met lots of different people along the way, so now they can go and build new relationships. And what's most important is that they start their new journey by themselves. But it doesn't mean that they separated forever. They built a special bond, and now they will be connected regardless of the distance and time between them. They're family now, and will stay the family no matter what. Our heroes aren't lonely anymore. They have each other, and they certainly will meet again. At least that's what I choose to believe in.